Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have another great guest. Her name is Carol Day, and I met her at a networking event and got in quick conversation and was just totally engrossed in what she does for a living. I've never heard of this profession, never heard of it. And so I wanted to talk to her more about that. But then as we got talking, she's just had a fun life. She's been around. She's done a lot of different things. And she somehow got suckered into doing what she's doing now. I say suckered, but I think she enjoys it a little bit because it gives her the lifestyle and freedom that she wants. But she lives actually just south of me here in Queen Creek, Buffalo area. And it's just a fun, exciting, booming area of the Phoenix Valley that I feel like Paradise Valley used to be kind of where the old money is. And now the new money is kind of flowing into Queen Creek. It's a new area there where there's just a lot of wealth going in. So she's carved out this kind of profession that's just unique. And I think, what if everybody had this unique idea of you can make money doing anything if you're willing to be focused and intentional with it? And I think that's one of the lessons I hope people get out of this is, what other things have I never thought of as like an actual career, but could be a career? If you're passionate about it, if you love doing it, if you're willing to do it, you can make anything a career. So with that being said, Carol, I'm going to let you kind of tell more of your childhood story and how you got to this place. How did you discover this super unique thing? And what's the process that you go through to educate people about it so they understand how to use you as a service?
Thank you, Samuel. I really do appreciate the time that we did get to meet each other, and it was a fun conversation. You're just a natural person to talk to and super easy and fun, and you have a good, enjoyable spirit about you. And those are the kind of people I really enjoy getting to know, as the conversations always just kind of flow naturally. And I appreciate that. So thank you for inviting me onto your show and appreciating what I do. You know, being at this age and a lot of experiences do get us to this point, and why we do what we do, or what makes us the way we are. Originally, I'm from California and lived in SoCal and San Fernando Valley area. And for the first 7-8 years of my life, and my mom, dad, and brother and I, we ended up moving to Colorado for various reasons. So we were a middle class family. My mom was a nurse. My dad worked for his brother-in-law on a sign painting thing, and they used to paint all those huge billboards up in the freeways and everything because they didn't have electrical signs back in the day. But so they were, good, hardworking family. So we were known as that. But through certain health things of my brother and whatever else, we decided to move. So we ended up in Colorado. And what a beautiful area. We were in Colorado Springs. There was a whole different dynamic. And of course, they had all the 4 seasons and tons of snow. And life was very different. And then some pivotal things we ended up joining into was this church, and it was interesting. It was very domineering and controlling in our lives. However, there were a lot of good things we took away from it. I was involved in that for a long, long time. And there were some key things from that experience that did make me who I was into. And I did focus a lot on character, ethics, morals, values, hard work, being diligent, the kind of parent I would want to be, the kind of person I would want to be. And those things were really huge kind of turning points that I grew up in. I also got into sports, and that developed a lot of confidence when you figure out what you're good at. Not everyone is good at sports. Some people are better at art, or some people are better at music, or some people are better at different things. And sports was definitely one of them. I like to be active. And so we played a lot of basketball and ran track, baseball, volleyball, all of it. And I was pretty good at it. And inside, you realize as a child, when you learn you have some skills or you're able to implore through those skills, that helps you define what your strengths are and how hard you work to win. And so when you're a team and you work as a team and you work hard to win, there's skills that you have to develop through that. And so you learn those skills. I think it's imperative for kids to have those skills. So that helped me out when I raised my children as I got older. I always had a huge diligent side inside of me that there was no laziness. I didn't like it. If my parents had a car full of groceries, I ran outside to help them and bring it in. I babysat since I was 11 years old. There was always like this maturity, that I probably thought I was older than I was, but I babysat. I helped my brother. We would shovel snow and mow lawns in the summer and do that kind of thing. So we were always had a working kind of spirit and mentality of earning. Things got really tough during those years as my mom decided to quit being a nurse and my dad wasn't as successful with his brother-in-law in California with the business that he tried to do on his own, and we lost everything. We literally lost everything to where we couldn't even afford to pay for the house and that kind of thing. So going from middle class family in California where we could afford whatever lifestyle for the most part to literally we had to, the house was gone. We had to sell the furniture to have money to move. And we basically had our little 12-foot Winnebago camping trailer along with 2 old vehicles. And then we moved to Arizona. We literally sold everything. So that was like a pivotal moment when I look now being an adult and I was a teenager coming up 13, 14 years old, going through something really emotional and what it was doing to the family. So those are huge. There was a huge lesson to really kind of appreciate what you do have. And just because you have money or whatever doesn't make you any happier. We found happiness anyway. And so when we did move to Arizona where there was some family, a little bit of family, I don't know why, my mom's cousins were there. We ended up in Arizona and my mom moved. So anyway, we ended up making a new life here and again, stayed in sports and really got huge into basketball and going into high school. I was now in 9th grade, high school in Tucson. My mom homeschooled me 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I was a huge nerd. I didn't know anything, and I wasn't taught anything either. So when I was thrown into Catalina High School in Arizona, I was like, I had no idea. And the church we were in, we weren't allowed to have friends outside of the church. We were the only ones that we could only really socialize with each other. It was really it was interesting. However, we didn't celebrate birthdays, Christmas, Easter. We didn't celebrate any of that stuff. So we never had any of those things in our life, type thing. But although it made us even weirder. So I'm in school in 9th grade. I didn't know anything, and I'm even weirder with that. But you get by, and life goes on. And then she pulls me out of school because she didn't like the strange characters of the 80s, 1980s here, of the spiked hair and the colored hair and all the crazy hairdos. And she thought they were a huge influence on me. And so she pulled me out of school, and then I went to work. So I'm 16 years old in 10th grade, and she pulls me out. And I really trying to understand why my mom would do something like that, not prioritize my education, because I wanted to be in school. I was a nerd. I liked to learn. And that kind of thing. So basically, I ended up just figuring it out. And then at that point, honestly, I didn't get along. I really just didn't get along. I felt like I was being controlled and being turned into something that I really wasn't. And there was something inside myself that said, no, there's something not right here. And my inner self wasn't at peace with that. So I literally left home at 16 years old. I worked at a grocery store bagging groceries, and I left home. And I pretty much stayed on my own. I was kind of stubborn. A rock and roll headbanger. I got into rock and roll, the 80s, hair bands, I wasn't bad. I always kept, when I grew up with all those moral ethics, a diligent, all those things stayed with me. I didn't want to be the statistic out there with people on the streets and doing that. I knew better. So I was always mentally healthy that way. And I stayed hardworking. So when I worked and stayed responsible and bought my things and paid for stuff and that kind of thing, it was no issue. Those were the huge defining moments when you're put out in a situation and you feel like you're being pushed down all the time. Are you going to get yourself back up? And learning at a young age, I kept pulling myself back up to always have a standard of who I was as a person. And so I just took the confidence that I had over the years and just kept on going. And once I kept winning with just remaining who I was as a person, it just really helped me out. And then I ended up becoming a mom in my 20s. So another huge thing is they didn't stay in Tucson. They moved to Canada because my dad's Canadian. So I'm a dual Canadian citizen at 17 years old, almost 18 years old. I did move up there and I did acquire my Canadian citizenship because living on your own wasn't easy. But then when I did move up there, I lived at home for a few months, but it didn't last very long. And then I left and then I had stayed out on my own since. But I stayed in Canada, the freezing cold Canada from Arizona for 17 years. And I had my children up there and my life and got married and those kinds of things. But I did end up raising my children on my own. And that was another pivotal moment is when you're on your own and you have children to take care of, what do you do? Do you just try to find some guy to take care of you? Or do you live off the system? Or do you pick yourself up and you just keep going? And so my choice was I couldn't even imagine the other. I ended up taking care of myself so I could take care of my kids. And priority was to make sure I was healthy enough to make sure my kids were raised properly. And always having the moral ethic value to teach them and make sure they had a good home. And I went to work and I came home and took care of them. And then they ended up in school. And now my son is 28 years old. He's married. They have 3 children. And he's a very dedicated man to his family. And he works in an oil field. They live in North Dakota, and he's pretty successful. My daughter's 22. She lives down here in Arizona, and she does very well. She lives with her boyfriend. They have a dog, and they do very well. They're good, happy kids. So that was a huge moment. I did leave Canada after 17 years, moved to Montana, lived there, raised my kids in small town Montana. And then I was so done with the cold 27 plus years later. I got so tired of the freezing cold. I don't like it. When you live from California and Arizona and you have the thing, you just forget it. And so when I finally came back to Arizona, it's been almost 6.5 years. I've never been happier ever in my life through all the journeys we went through. And I've had some good times. I've had a lot of struggles, but this is where I'm the happiest and built a life down here. And that's where I got into my career background for a long time was accounting and finance. I started that in my early 20s. I was educated even while I was pregnant with my son. I was going to school and working while I was pregnant. And then not long after he was born, within 6 months, I did find a job in an accounting position. And I worked my way up to where I was a comptroller. And then I earned a business degree because I wanted to learn outside of the finance world. So I earned a degree in my 30s. I graduated in 2014. My kids saw that and watched their mom graduate with a degree. So not only did I work, raise my kids, and earn a degree, that was still building. It just really said who you were as a person. You can do anything you want to do if you apply yourself. You have to apply yourself and be dedicated and committed to your word. So when I said I was going in 2009 and I enrolled for the spring of 2010 in the university, I said, I'm not ever going to, I will graduate. I will take these 4 years and I will do everything in my power. And I graduated with honors. So you keep your word. So when you say you're going to do something, you do it. And that is something I had instilled in me and that I did as a young person. And when you follow through with that life, when you get older, it's easier. It's hard at first to do what you say you're going to do and actually do it. And then life is easier and it flows. You raise good, healthy children. And when you say no, it means no. And when you instill morals, values, and that to be honest as a person to yourself and to other people, to have a respectable reputation, those things is what fuels you. And when you do get older and children grow up, life is a lot more balanced and a lot more simpler through that hard work and that tenaciousness of sticking with what you say you're going to do. So that was like a huge part of my life that I was so stubborn about and stuck with it. And of course, there's tons more, but there's no point in boring you with all that. But through a lot of moving and a lot of challenges, but also a lot of good times too, a lot of good times. So once I graduated with a business degree, I didn't want to sit at a desk anymore. I got bored of sitting at a desk. I was good at accounting. I was good at number crunching and analyzing and taking care of all the numbers, but it bored me. And that's why I wanted to learn business and marketing and everything behind it, entrepreneurial. I always had business ideas in my head, always, probably most of my life. And then I did open my store, and I had a clothing boutique in Montana. And I also turned it into a formal gown store. And that formal gowns, they were, people could sign their old dresses that they wore for an hour. And then grandma bought, all their granddaughters' dresses. And so I had a ton of dresses. I did new and that kind of thing. I also went to expos and did shows and made jewelry and had lots of purses and stuff like that. I had plus size clothing, which a lot of people didn't. I incorporated that, and that was one of my hot tickets, and people appreciated I offered that. So that was successful. I learned a lot. You learn through lots of different challenges. And then I had an opportunity to sell my store, and I sold it. Because that's kind of like when you run businesses, you have an opportunity, you want to sell them, and you kind of take advantage of that. And I'm still in Montana going, there's not a lot of industry here. I have a huge amount of credentials. I have a degree. What do I do? There's not much going on there. They have a bunch of casinos and McDonald's and fast food. It's like, I'm not working in fast food, or go back to accounting. Then I'm back where I started. So I was talked into one of the ladies I knew. She did my radio commercials, and her husband worked at Toyota in the finance department. And he said, Carol, we're starving for people, and we don't have anybody, but I think this is something you'd be good at. And the funny part is I said, absolutely not. I think that's a joke. I don't like salespeople. I don't like the feeling you get when you go and buy a car. I know I've bought multiple cars on my own, and it's very frustrating and that kind of thing. So I kind of laughed and I said, thank you, but no thank you. And then, once we talked about it a little bit more, it's funny because I grew up with Toyota. I love Toyota, and Toyota is an excellent product, and they are a loyal brand. They are the brand people buy between Honda and that kind of thing. But I've always loved cars. And this is something I didn't mention growing up. I always had a thing for cars. I even worked in an auto auction in Canada for 10 years during those auctions every month. And all the way up to where I trained people in the office and handled all the registration bills, sale, the cash, everything coming in, to where all the new computer systems and everything. And all of that knowledge and everything that tied together and learning all of that gave me footing to work at Toyota. And I said, why not? I don't have to be like those sales guys. If you look like one and you have a stigma, but I don't have to be like them, and just see what it's like. Give it a shot. When I sold my first car, a Toyota Prius, with this crazy couple, they were so cool. I'll never forget them. I'll never forget the car. I'll never forget the test drive. I'll never forget those people. It was my first one, and I was hooked. I ended up excelling to where I was second, third in place behind the two top guys who'd been there 20 years with their huge thing. And I was the new girl coming in. But you treat people right and you respect them, they'll come back to you and they'll refer you. And sure enough, it was great. And it was fun. You don't have to sit behind a desk all day. You get out there, test drive. They want the car. There's nothing bigger of a rush than, so you help somebody out. And then away you go. I got them the best deal I could get them. I used to work the sales managers so hard. They knew that about me. They knew when I was coming back, you better give me some more money on that trade. Give me some more money off of this car. And my customers appreciated that. And they would, they would kind of joke around a little bit, but they knew I would move cars and help people out and save money. Well, then when I moved to Arizona, they offer the auto broker world, which is unique. And I didn't really know or understand that until there was a job position that was open up when I moved here. And I'm like, I'm curious. I at least want to know about it. And the first thing when he said, the manager said, Carol, the customers don't go to the dealership. And I was confused. And then he explained the process of, you handle the entire process here in your office, bring the cars over here, they test drive with you, and you handle every single piece of the paperwork. They sign with you. They're only working with you. It's a one person, one stop, usually within an hour. and they're gone home. And I'm like, this is the most brilliant service ever. It's the Cadillac version of the car industry. People loved it. I have made nothing but friends. So 2018 was my journey in the auto broker world. I worked for AAA Car Buying, and I worked there for 4 years. The owner sold it, and he owns Centennial Leasing and Sales. I moved over there, very far from my house out in Phoenix, so I went remote, and I created Auto Angel to help people even more. Instead of working for somebody, I was better able to help somebody, and I just took all my skills, the business skills, the entrepreneur idea, all the ethics and morals, and all the tenaciousness and everything inside of me to just, because they don't hand you anything, you got to work it by yourself, to just go for it. And it's done very well. I love it. This is its 2nd year anniversary now, coming up in November, and I'm really happy about that. And it does give freedom. The hard work does pay off to where you do have that peace. So, but you do have to work hard in the beginning. You do have to put yourself out there, and the fearlessness. There's always fear, and if you're not afraid, you're doing something wrong. So you have to just keep going if you believe in it, if that's who you are. And I wouldn't have stuck with it and created Auto Angel if it wasn't. I would have just moved on and done something else. I have a lot of skills in different areas, so I would have just moved on. But I love it.
Right.
I love it.
Well, and I think that's what's so unique. When I met you, I could see how happy you were with whatever it is you're doing, which I didn't know what you're like. You kind of told me what you were doing, but I didn't know what it was or how it worked. And it's an interesting thing. So if there's somebody's like wanting to buy a car, you're a great person to talk to. You may not be the person for them. If they're in Canada or in Nebraska or wherever, maybe you can help them. Maybe you just refer them to somebody like yourself who can help them. But the point is that there's a thing out there there's a service out there for if you don't want to go deal with these people at a car dealership that's really hard to deal with. You walk in there and 4 hours later, you walk out with like $10,000 more than the car was worth debt for all the add-ons that they throw onto it. If you want to avoid all of that and really just get what you want, then that's who you would call as somebody like Carol in that scenario. And one of the things that I think is also fascinating is now that you're kind of midway through your working years of life, all of the experience that you gained, a lot of times people think, oh, I can't do that because I'm not qualified. I haven't worked in that industry. I haven't done that. But skills are transferable. And if you can get in your mind that your skill set is being employed in a certain industry, but that skill set actually can be employed in a different industry, that's how you level up your income generally, is by taking the skill set you learn in one industry and transpose it into another industry, not changing you, not changing who you are, not changing your skill set, but applying it to a more lucrative industry. So I'm sure the wedding dress industry is a lot of trying on, a lot of test driving wedding dresses, a lot of trying to find the right one for the right person that they like, that has the right kind of lace, the right kind of ruffles or whatever. And at the end of the day, you have to help them identify what they want and ultimately feel confident enough to buy something that you're going to wear for an hour and it's going to be in pictures for the rest of your life. Well, maybe that's bigger than a decision about a car, but then maybe it's less important than like everybody weights their decision process a little different. But that was a skill of understanding humans, helping them identify what they're looking for. It's those skills, those can be applied in any industry. They don't have to be applied in the car industry. They could be applied in the financial industry. They could be applied in the grass industry. They could be applied in, any industry. And that's really the power of the recognition. Hey, this is a skill that I learned. So I think that's one of the things that kind of stuck out to me. I have a question about, this is going to come way out of left field, but I think that it's important to talk about because you mentioned it multiple times. So I think it's a big part of your story. And I think that it needs to be a bigger part of more people's story. And that is that you were at some point, it sounds like when you got to Colorado is when you joined this church. Your family joined the church. And as you joined that church, that's where you got a lot, you kind of got working hard and stuff from your parents, but you also got a lot of the morals, the values, the ethics, how to be a good person from a system or religion that ultimately at this point, it sounds like you've disassociated with, and you said, hey, that's actually was more of a domineering is the word you use, a negative thing in my life. However, I gained all these positive things from it. And I think oftentimes people choose to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They say, oh, that was a terrible career. I didn't like that. I want to reject that. That was a terrible religion. That was a terrible marriage. That was a terrible whatever. And they want a blanket statement and move on rather than using discernment to determine, hey, what were the positives from that experience? I'm going to be beneficial from every experience. I was a single mom. I can rely on a man, a system, or myself which aspect of me do I want to develop? Which skill set do I want to develop? And I think these are who you are that maybe doesn't get amplified because of what you do, that people miss who you are.
That's a good.
And that's, say that again. Yeah. And it happens to everybody. I don't think it's just you. I think that a lot of people, especially when we're networking, people say, well, Carol, what do you do? And way more important than what you do is who you are. And that's what I kind of picked up on our conversation, and why I was so excited to have this conversation is I think you're a great human. I think you're a great person. I knew I was going to have a good conversation. I didn't know the full details of our conversation, but I knew that somebody who cares about people, even when you were telling me what you do, it wasn't, well, I make the sales process easier for people. It was, hey, I give people a more pleasurable experience. These are the things that I'm helping people avoid. These are the things I'm helping people gain. And is all other people centric. And that type of awareness, not everybody has. So let's get back into this religion conversation, because I want to understand. I believe you were talking about Jehovah's Witnesses as a religion. No, not even that. I'm so confused. Well, it would be in alignment. So what religion was it, and why are people joining it if the outcome is people leaving it frequently or feeling domineered?
Well, I'll explain that here just briefly. The church was called Worldwide Church of God. It was founded by Herbert W. Armstrong. He died in the 80s. It was all based on Old Testament laws that in Exodus. So the Feast of Tabernacles, Days of Unleavened Bread, all those feasts, we literally kept. It wasn't that Jesus died on the cross. He was the ultimate da-da-da-da-da. It was they made us like we were the chosen ones, like the Israelites. And that's how we founded this church. And so when it came to like Jehovah's, Christmas, birth, that kind of thing, we weren't allowed to because they were pagan. Easter's pagan, Christmas pagan, all these things. And you weren't allowed to celebrate yourself and your birthday. Eat pork. We weren't allowed to eat seafood. We weren't allowed to wear makeup. We weren't allowed to do this. We couldn't have friends or marry outside of the church. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
So what drove, what
split up in the 90s? The church, people started reading scripture, and then people started making questions you weren't allowed to. The church wouldn't allow you to ask these questions without them interpreting it for you and not thinking for yourself. And once that all came, that those old laws were done away with, that ended the church. So we got out of it. So the church is done and gone, basically. There's some little branches of it that some people decided to stay in that church. However, some people that I know, because I still have friends all these years later from the church, a lot of us are friends on Facebook. A lot of us know each other from that church for decades and decades. However, some people are bitter. Some people are very upset and angry that they were believing and living a life that was closed in, that a lot of it wasn't true. I believe maybe Herbert W. Armstrong believed it the way he interpreted it, but evangelism back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and that was a big deal back in those days. It was huge, the radio evangelism, whatever, Billy Graham, the whole thing. But I didn't get bitter about it. I learned so many positive things that I established, which kept me clean, which kept me pursuing who I was and what I wanted in life and how I wanted to attribute myself as a person, as a mother, and in life as a worker, and that kind of thing. So, but we played a lot of sports and became athletes. They worked just hard. We learned etiquette and how to set tables. We learned formal. We learned how to dance, all the formal dances. It was quite a huge church. There was a lot going on in there.
I think there's so many things that get a bad rap. So I'm just so intrigued by this. I was homeschooled as well, was kind of we'll say outcast. Everybody in town made fun of us, but it's fine. Well, it's just different, right? It's human behavior, right? If you understand that humans are going to be humans and they're, I don't know if scared is even the right word, but it's tribalistic to shun or create separation between things that you don't understand and yourself. So like, there's no shame in it. It just happened. And everybody has different perspectives of that. That's fine. Mine is humans are humans. Give them grace. But I do wonder, when we hear the word church, then we think, okay, why would somebody join that church, especially being a convert to that church? Like, what was that process of indoctrination or shifting belief? Because if somebody's joining it, then they would have, in my opinion, been exposed to Christianity been exposed to other forms of religions and beliefs before they joined it. So you'd have to go from like almost a deconstruction process to join and believe something that extreme. Now, I think if we take it outside of being a church, then we'll have that conversation in a minute. But I'm just wondering, what was the driving factor of like, oh, let's join this and have our whole family be indoctrinated in this way?
Perfect question. And growing up in that era, which was, I believe you're a lot younger than I am. So growing up
A little
in this
bit.
era, seriously, you have only had, never had internet. We had the turn dial phone. You know, it wasn't the same era that we live in nowadays. The church convinced people that if you were not one of these chosen ones doing all these holy days and the feast and all these things, you were not going to make it to the place of safety. I'm talking weird language here, but it was true. You were of the world and you would not be chosen, and you would be damned the rest of your life. You had to be a part of this church and a member of this church and raise your families and only be associated with the church because we were the only ones. There's a lot of cults and religions out there who are like that. There's a lot more than you know. It allowed me, when I was in university, I studied theology and I studied the history of religions and the beginning of end of times, and I dug into religion huge. So it allowed me to open up my mind to understand that. So my parents, it's a brainwashing is what it's, honestly, it is. And so what happens is they were just like, let's go check the church out. My mom, they were listening to him on the radio. He was a radio evangelist. And so they had listened to him in the cars back in the 70s, and they were listening. So it kind of tunes it in. And then 1980, 81, I think it was, when my mom's like, hey, who wants to go to church? That was a new thing in our life. And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't know, whatever. Sounds good to me. My brother's like, no, I don't go to church. You know, so he was older. He's 4 years older. He understood it more. And he's like, I don't go to church. Anyway, we all did. And you got sucked in because it's charismatic. They tell you all this stuff, so you feel like you're a part of a big organization. You feel like you're a part of a family, a part of a thing, and you're chosen now. You're one of the chosen ones. And because you're one of the chosen ones, you're going to have this life in the kingdom of heaven. And you'll avoid the tribulation, because the tribulation's coming when Jesus comes. In all those years, you're going to avoid it being a member of this church. I could go on. I swear to you, it's
Well, I
like that. And I'm young. I'm 8 years old. I'm 8 years
Right.
old. So I'm going along thinking, oh God, and everyone lives in fear. They prey on fear. So if you don't do this, and so if you have fear and guilt inside of yourself of questioning things in your church, there's something wrong with it. There's something off. So you have to be able to allow yourself questions. And when the questions started coming out in the 90s, even before, but really huge in the 90s, that's when the church broke up. And they realized we were living this whole life. But I looked at it and go, there was a lot of cool stuff that came from it too. I became an athlete. I learned all these things, and I'm just like, well, I got all this good stuff out of it, and now I'm just going to move on. And my mom was a Baptist. I mean, she grew up in the southern parts of the states in Arkansas, and they were a Baptist. There was a huge Baptist community there. My dad wasn't so big into it, but that's why. And so when you kind of grow up understanding God or thinking you know the Bible, and people think they know stuff, they don't ask questions. They just believe it because they're told it. And back in the day, people just believe things, and most people are followers and not leaders. Most people are followers. They're afraid to ask questions. And when you're afraid to ask questions, you just follow and go along with the regime. And lots of different religions are like that. There's so many of them. And when you start questioning, how did that religion come into play? How did this one come into play? How did this one come? I learned a lot, and it was fascinating. So it was a good thing, and I'm glad I went through it, and I don't regret being in the church. I don't regret ever having it a part of my life. I don't regret it. I'm glad my eyes are opened, and I'm glad we learned from those lessons, and I can relate to other people now, and I respect it. And respect people's choices. I respect people's religions. I respect people's way of life.
Yeah, and I think that's so beautiful. We could have this conversation for literally hours, probably, because I'm so intrigued by it. We had I'll say a similar-ish growing up process. I was raised LDS and still am. I enjoyed being a Mormon or whatever we want to call ourselves nowadays. They keep changing the name, so that doesn't really matter, but they think it matters. But yeah, whatever. The thing is, like growing up, my mom wasn't sure what she believed, and so we ended up going through a lot of education and studying a lot of different religions as well, just as part of our homeschool was studying a lot of different religions. I didn't know that she was kind of leading this because she was trying to find out what she believed. But I'm really grateful for the ability to have studied so many, because it's really made me, as you say, very tolerant and compassionate towards other people's belief systems, very understanding, like, okay, what's the values? What are the benefits? And I think whether you're joining a church or anything, right? You could join a church, you could join a movement, you could join a YMCA, whatever it is. I think joining something that has a cultish-like culture is actually a grand benefit to society. And I think society as a whole has, in an effort to throw off any cultures and unband themselves from any quote unquote domineering structured regime type of identity, then they've opted into everybody has their own wild identities. And I think it's hurt our culture more than it's helped, because now there's very little unity in the public eye, rather than, hey, at least we know, hey, there's that group. This is what they believe. It's a little strange, but they've got a community. If there was a natural disaster, they're taking care of themselves. This group, if there's something going on, they're taking care of themselves. We've gotten away from community in a chase, or in pursuant of individualism. And I think individualism from a country or a culture perspective on the grander scale it leads to not healthy communities in the long run. And so I think that this drive, or at least understanding and having that early young training of what does a culture look like? Why is this valuable? Like you said, you got to learn a bunch of stuff that most people have no idea about. Traditional dances, like understanding etiquette, how to set a table. These things of like really important things, in my opinion, like understanding how to be kind. Most people never learn that because they're chasing individualism. And now we have parents that are letting their 2 and 3 year olds dictate how they're going to be raised, which is just such a complete upside down culture of what you grew up with. And I think a lot of ways what I grew up with. And so it's fascinating. One of the things that I wrote down, one of the notes I wrote down is, I need to teach my kids, they're in teamwork right now, or they're starting in sports. And it's really common, especially like when you watch baseball or soccer, where the ball goes somewhere and the whole horde of children just goes with wherever the ball is. They don't actually understand like positioning and support. And so something I was thinking is like, what if I was to teach my kids the best way of teamwork and developing the skill of supporting? Like, hey, I want to just recognize when you supported somebody, rather than, did you make a basket? How many people did you pass the ball to? Like, how many people? Let's make that tally. You have to first get the ball and then pass it. So that was one thing. And then this is probably the biggest question I gained. So I want you to just expand on this a little bit. This decision, when did you first, if you're to, I don't know that you're even going to know this answer, but when do you remember consciously going through this question of like, hey, I'm going to decide who I'm going to be. I'm not going to let my outside influences tell me who I'm going to be. I'm going to decide who I'm going to be. Because if this is all somebody asks themselves from this podcast is, who am I going to decide to be in life? Man, if we had more people answering that question and standing on their guns and not moving for anybody, we'd be such a better society. So when did you first kind of decide, hey, I got to determine who I'm going to be, and this is who I decide to be?
Very good question, and a very strong, pivotal point in my life. I was about 14 years old, 13, 14, when I really started paying attention. You understand a little more when you start becoming a teenager. You start figuring things out, and you start seeing life a little differently. Some people just mold themselves to their environment, and I was not like that. And because I recognized I wasn't like that, when people tried to mold me into what they thought I should be, there's something inside of me that didn't sit right. Of course, you're still young and impressionable and that kind of thing, but I was 14. I'm going to say 13, 14, as I was trying to really adjust and really starting to understand and pick up on things that I was kind of like, how come I didn't understand that or know that? How come this, that? And life starts seeing things differently. And then as you get older and older and older and older and older and decades later,
right,
you really do always see those things. But I knew at that point, no one is going to turn me into something I am not. Nobody. I won't let them. Not even my mother. She tried all her life. Nobody was allowed to. Nobody was going to change me from what I knew. And if you couldn't see that I was a good person based on qualities and ethics, I really wouldn't allow a lot of place in there. I wanted somebody to recognize that there were true qualities in there. And those are the things I tried to focus on and pay attention to since I was young. And then when I got into my 20s and I was growing up there and raising children, I instilled all of that even into them. Just be you.
Yeah. And I think that's easier to do. Another note that I had here is like, if you didn't have an experience of what that might have looked like, of strong ethics, of strong morals, of strong character, of these things, then I wonder how much you would have been committed to who you are today. If you didn't have an experience of that, like if you were left around in the wilderness with 12 other people, would you have naturally decided that you wanted to be a strong, ethical, moral person? Or would you have just done what everybody else is doing? Or was that modeled behavior that you saw somebody else with strong ethics, morals, determined to be a certain person, and you said, hey, I actually like being that person better than what I'm seeing these people who are just changing all the time? All you ever saw was people changing. Do you think that you would decide, I'm going to be me? And then where'd you get the blueprint of deciding I want to be moral? Because you could have equally said, I'm going to be me and I'm going to be a dirty, lying scoundrel person, right? You could have made that same decision and still decided to be you, but you decided to be you, and the you that you wanted to be was somebody of confidence, was somebody of morals, was somebody of ethics. And so I wonder where that example came from that you said, no, this is who I want to be.
Good question again. Good things you are picking up on. I think I always had a nature about me that wasn't vindictive and mean and nasty. And there was always probably like an empathetic and emotional side of me. Just when you're a kid, you don't think about it like that. You're young, you're a kid. You don't know, life's going on. You care about getting on your roller skates or doing this or doing that and having fun, hanging out with friends, riding your bike and living life. That's the majority of it. I think I always had a good nature. It wasn't like something I struggled with and like, oh God, I better be a better person. I'm a horrible person. I better change and be a better quality person. I think it was just always my nature. And because when I babysat at 11 years old, I always loved children. I always they're vulnerable. And I just always had a thing. I had a maturity. So I don't know why it was weird. But I will say, joining the church is about 8 years old. And when you learn, I used to take notes at church. Again, I was a nerd. I mean, I used to sit there and I would try to write down all those verses and try to understand everything the best I could. And I picked up on the commandments and all these things that were worthy. And when you read the things that made somebody worthy, that's what attracted me. I was attracted to the worthiness and those things that came from it. So I learned and understood what it's like to be a good parent, but discipline is necessary. Discipline is necessary, not beat them to death. Discipline. And when you say no, it means no. We don't eat candy just before dinner. You can have candy after you eat your dinner. There are just certain things that there were rules. And if you didn't respect me as your mom or respect your family or respect your grandma and you were disrespectful, there were rules. If I had to ground you, I'm grounding you. And I stuck with it. So I believe those were pivotal moments. And that's where it just, at that time, I was just like, that's who I like. I'm attracted to this worthiness and this person who can set those examples of caring about another individual and taking care of themselves on the inside. And so I've just always stuck with that. But it was through the church and studying those things that I will be honest and say that is where it kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. I never fought against it. And it was never a thing that I was just like, God, I had to be like that. I was like, no, this is awesome. And that's what kept me out of trouble. I mean, I'm on my own at 16. I'm a rock and roll headbanger. I didn't get into drugs. I didn't do any of this. I knew better. I knew that was wrong. Right. I knew it was bad to do those things. I knew it would tear your life apart. I understood it from a young age. And because I learned these ethics and morals and how to live life to be quality. So quality was always there, not quantity, quality. Yeah. It really was. Honestly, it amplified, I think, the nature I naturally had, to be honest with you.
That's cool. Well, I think a lot of people are probably more naturally good than they are not. And a lot of people just don't necessarily have that example, or they find it sometimes difficult to stay strong in an opposing environment. And I hope that I can help my children do that. I know that for me, it's not been insanely difficult to remain true to who I am. I've also been allowant of myself to, like when I just like you maybe discover, okay, I was raised to believe this thing that's like, you cannot under no circumstances do this. And then you get more educated, you think, okay, that actually is not that important to me anymore. So I'm not so rigid that I'm stuck with this is who I'm going to be forever. Yeah. But part of who I am is changing. When I was dating my wife, I think it was on our second or third date, and we were talking about like who we wanted to marry. And I was like, look, the only thing I know is that in 5 years and in 10 years, I'm not going to be the person I am today. That's the only thing I know, because I'm constantly trying to change myself. I'm constantly trying to improve. So if you're marrying me and you fall in love with me, who I am today, you will be disappointed in 5 years, because I'm not going to be the same me in 5 years. And I don't think you are going to be. If you're planning on being the same you in 5 years, I don't know that I'm going to be okay with that, because I'm planning on changing and I want to grow together. And so that was a pivotal part of our marriage conversation, like whether we even get married, is the commitment to growth, the commitment to change, the commitment to developing who we actually want to be in this life. And so it's a mixture of both, but I would say that's the core principle for me, is I'm an agent of change rather than a static being. And that's the thing that has stayed consistent, is my belief system about who I am and what I want to do. So
I appreciate,
man,
I appreciate.
Yeah, this has been a crazy good podcast, and we're out of time. I got another appointment I have to hop on. But thank you so much, Carol. Where would somebody go if they wanted, let's say they're in the Phoenix Valley and they want to kind of use your services, learn more about your services? Where would be the best place for them to reach out to you and get that information?
You know, the best place, I usually get people to go onto my website, and it's yourautoangel.com, yourautoangel.com. You're welcome to email me and call me. My number is 623-250-2234. Reach out to me. I'm happy to help or talk, answer questions. Some people just aren't sure. And they want to talk. You'll talk to me personally. You're not going to get some random guy from India. You're actually talking to me. So I'll help answer anything that you need to know. It could be 6 months down the road. You could be your neighbor just had a car accident, needs a car. So
awesome. Well, I super appreciate you. And for all of those of you who are interested or just want to learn more about this, again, maybe you're in Nebraska, maybe you're in Kansas, maybe you're in Virginia, and you're like, well, maybe I want to do something like this. It sounds like a cool idea. How can I start something like this in my neighborhood? Maybe she's able to help you with that as well, just to get out there and serve. Just figure out how you can serve and bless the people around you. And if you go with things in the right energy and you're focused on serving people, I think there's no way you're going to lose in anything you do, in any endeavor. Go with the right intentions and you're going to be great. So
yeah.
Thank you so much, Carol. And we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy show.
Sam, I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.